Hello, this is Vision Denial and the road to MSI. My name is Sam, and if you're not familiar with the show, I watch every playoff series for every region that participates in any Riot-sanctioned international event. Yes, including that one. And you might be wondering, I've already watched all of them right now. So what's this? Well, this is Meet the Teams. And now we're going to meet Royal Never Give Up, the defending MSI title champions. And for many of you who may not know, they're going to be playing remotely for this year. Due to a lot of the lockdowns around Shanghai, the team will not be able to leave Korea to Korea so that they can isolate long enough so that they're able to participate. So they'll be using a system that they were able to use during the Asia Games, something 2 years ago. So with it, let's just meet the defending champion holders for MSI, Royal Never Give Up. Starting with the coaching staff, many of you may be familiar with Tabe. If you are an old-time League of Legends viewer, you may recognize him as being the support player of the Starhorn Royal Club, or Royal Never Give Up, at the time in the finals against SKT. So, he's been just at it, being a coach ever since that particular final, jumping in back and forth between many various Chinese teams and briefly in the LMS and then in Brazil on Kaboom Esports, and then having stuck with Royal Never Give Up since December of 2019. And he's been fairly consistent, alongside his coach Kenju, who some of you may not recognize him, but he's been jumping around from the coaching scene, starting with Invictus Gaming since 2013 and going back and forth between a bunch of different teams, having been with Royal Never Give Up since 2021. And these two together have given us sort of a identity towards Royal Never Give Up for split push in neutral objective. You can tell by the bans that are done against them that much of what Royal Never Give Up specializes in is 1-3-1s with an ability to collapse with a lot of their zoning and re-engage tools. And you can tell that this is where they go for, because much of the things that could counter it are sieging tools and things that are really good during small skirmishes and bursts. So what does this translate to in terms of their playstyle overall then? Well, with their playstyle over here, they've had a fairly decent amount of success and a fairly average length of games, many of it with a lot of fights. I will apologize, much of what is in terms of collected stats is not quite there. The LPL has an unfortunate lack of publicly available statistics from them. A lot of the Wikipedias are fairly sparse into being able to find these things. But you can still glean a lot of it from the way that they play and what they do get. Well, what do they get? Well, they usually have the advantage in terms of lane pressure early in, as well as the ability to gather control around neutral objectives, focusing primarily on Drakes. They get many of the what's the word I'm looking for? They get many of the first advantages and are first to many of the objectives when needed, but are also an incredibly aggressive, kill-heavy team. They get as many kills as deaths, and this tends to fall short for them, as they will often try to create advantages and move forward in positions that they do not have the advantage in. And so this may be very exciting games to watch, but it is very much a kill and contest for everything. And if teams are unprepared, they will take the lion's share of everything on the map, but teams that are prepared and are easily able to counteract and fight quickly should be able to punish this over-aggressive nature. Let's start with Bin, the top laner in Royal Never Give Up, has been jumping around on Weibo Gaming previously in 2021 and also in Suning during the entirety of the 2019 to 2021, having finally gone to Royal Never Give Up as their main starting top laner. Bin is a very solid side lane based carry. He is aggressive by nature, and with it does bring up a lot of pressure in his lane consistently, allowing time for Royal Never Give Up to set up in places for neutral objectives or for other sieges around the map, whilst taking up a lot of the attention towards himself. He is also very excellent at finding flank opportunities, and a lot of his particular champion pool, even though it may not be as large as some of his contemporaries in the international scene, is much more consistent, however, with the kind of playstyle that really favors Royal Never Give Up's modus operandi, their MO. So, with it, there are some glaring things. He will overextend on a frequent basis just to get the pressure, and sometimes will get caught out during some of these flank opportunities, but he is still fairly consistent at making sure that he brings the applied team fight tools that his kit will offer him, whilst also still being fairly frequently ahead in gold, as well as just a gold making machine. Royal Never Give Up understands that he's one of the main carries and allocates much of that resource to him, even though he is not the highest kill participation. We then have the jungler Wei. Wei has been with Royal Never Give Up since December of 2020. He's been with the team for quite some time at this point. And he has been able to bring up a level of pressure and aggression that Royal Never Give Up really takes advantage of. Again, much of the way the team has doesn't really shine a huge champion pool, but they have a very effective champion pool. And we get to see a lot of them, mostly because of the sheer number of games the region plays. So what do I mean by a very aggressive and consistent champion pool? Well, look across the board. A very positive win rate based across his top 5 picks. And all of them he uses to a very aggressive gank heavy standard. This to bring a lot of advantages where need be in the early game, as to be able to transition towards the different neutral objectives that are going to be needed, as these laners need to be ahead, take early objectives, be able to find those early dragon leads where need be, and to be able to put side lane pressures in their 1-4 or 1-3-1 compositions. Wei is there consistently to give pressure as much as possible. He does fall a little behind in terms of his jungle counterparts, in terms of the camps that he brings up, and unfortunately do not have the metrics for this in terms of his early game play, but do understand that, mostly because this is hard to find, but he is somebody who prioritizes putting pressure in the lanes first and foremost. We then have the King of Spring himself. LPL fans will know him as somebody who rarely is able to qualify for Worlds or rarely able to show his guts for it, but is a strong contender in the Spring Split. And my God, is he ever. In a team that, no matter how hard they do try to get early gold leads or take the early pressure or early neutrals, tends to fall behind in gold, Xiaohu is a consistency across the board at all stages of the game. Fairly flexible in being able to do siege, zone control, re-engage, frontline, and so on, as well as side lane, and being able to switch champion pools between himself and Bin. Xiaohu is a force to be reckoned with. This is his time to shine, and he'll get the chance to reclaim his title for MSI again with the same kind of gravitas that he usually has. The playoffs have been nothing but a very large delight for Xiaohu, who has done everything in his powers to find picks, create space, and make sure that his team is always finding an avenue to play ahead where they are experts in, and that is the late game team fights around neutral objectives. And honestly, given the caliber of many of the mid laners going in there, Xiaohu is a contender for the best one there. And frequently, I think he's going to be a delight to see play against the lanes. We then head to the bot lane for GALA. Now, GALA's mainstay in the larger sphere of the LPL has only been with Royal Never Give Up since June of 2020. And quite frankly, he has been very solid, if only a little inflexible. One of the least flexible bot laners across the international scene in MSI. You can tell over here with only about 2 champions that he largely plays during the entirety of spring, Aphelios and Jinx, he is incredibly solid and consistent at, and when given the space, he will carry. He's very good at cleanup team fights, and honestly, he deserves the amount of gold and gold allocation and time that is invested into him during these games, but he does take a long time to ramp up, and with the nature of Royal Never Give Up being a more of a late game team, regardless of the amount of early game pressure they apply, the GALA doesn't seem to click until we hit those mid to late game team fights. Finally, we have Ming, who has been just part of the Royal Never Give Up lineup since 2016, and so any long-term fan would be very familiar with his playstyle. Much of a go-getter, setup, roaming, monster of a machine with quite a roster of picks to play with, but really likes his engage and tank supports. To a fault sometimes. He has an unfortunate habit of really using his face first to a lack of an expression to use, falling behind oftentimes in terms of his support counterpart and trying to create vision setup for anything necessary in the guise and hopes of being able to create a very good team fight. He also finds himself in very awkward position during roams, but because of how frequently he roams and because he very well understands the timing of these roams, he also catches laners off guard in myriad of positions when he gets the opportunity. This man will find ways to create team fights and will be given any kind of ways to find flexible picks with like Gragas, Set, and so on, just to be able to just really hammer home their ability to just team fight overall. So what do I think of them? Unfortunately, I could not present enough of the stats that would be relevant towards them. Again, the LPL has very hard difficulty of being able to have public stats when it comes to these things and a lot of the open sites that are required for it. But 2 key things you should know. They are not an early game team, which is usually an issue when it comes to these international events with these very high octane teams who, across the board, many are very early game focused. The other thing, however, is that they are late game monsters. The second that you drop the ball, even once during the mid game, or even as you enter the mid game, Royal Never Give Up will find ways to just take it, balloon it, and control everything. They do find metrics like getting a lot of the first turrets, being able to do things like getting the first Drake and a bunch of the neutrals, but the unfortunate state of matters is that their laners don't usually shape up to find advantages in terms of the 1v1s. They take a lot of time to ramp up, but once they've ramped up and they've gotten to that mid-game point, it's all over. You need to finish games early against this team, or they will end you within 10 minutes after the mid-game starts. So, many of the emerging region teams that are qualified so far will probably have a harder time being able to end games against them if they do not find a footing to balloon the leads early. And this is, I think, why they may be a strong contender for second or being able to contest against T1. But given the nature of T1 being a very early game-centered team and being the most dominant one going in, I have my doubts that they'll be able to do it. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. And I'll be doing the rest of these Meet the Teams as we go forward. With that, I'll see you next time.